Morning television is supposed to be light, warm, and welcoming. A place where celebrity guests laugh, sip tea, and share anecdotes about their lives. But what happens when a royal walks in with a chip on his shoulder and an attitude to match? That's exactly what unfolded the morning Prince Harry sat across from Alison, Hammond, and Dermot on this morning. What was supposed to be a polished promotional appearance quickly spiraled into one of the most heated confrontations in daytime television history. Harry's sharp tongue, Dermot's growing frustration, and Alison's desperate attempts to keep the peace turned a routine interview into an unforgettable showdown that ended with Harry storming off set. The This Morning studio had its usual buzz of energy as the cameras rolled. Alison Hammond greeted viewers with her signature cheerfulness, flashing that famous smile. Dermot adjusted his notes, his calm, professional tone setting the stage. "Good morning, everyone. Today we have a very special guest joining us," Alison announced, her voice filled with enthusiasm. "He's someone you all know, someone whose life has been, well, more than a little public. Please welcome Prince Harry." The audience applauded as Harry strode onto the set. Dressed in a dark tailored suit with no tie, his shirt casually unbuttoned at the collar, he gave the crowd a small wave. But there was something in his expression, tight jaw, furrowed brow, that suggested he hadn't come to play nice. Alison leaned forward warmly. "Harry, it's lovely to have you here with us today. How are you feeling this morning?" Harry gave a dry chuckle, leaning back in his chair. "Well, Alison, I suppose I'm feeling the same way I always do, surrounded by people who want to ask questions they think they already know the answers to." The audience laughed awkwardly. Alison's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she recovered. "Oh, no. We're just excited to chat with you. Tell us, how's life been in California, settling in with Meghan and the kids?" Harry's reply came quick, sharp, and with an edge. "California is fine. At least there I'm not hounded every waking moment by the British press or," he added, glancing at Dermot, by television presenters looking for their next headline. Dermot raised his brows but kept his voice calm. "We're not looking for headlines, Harry. Just giving our viewers a chance to hear from you directly. Surely that's something you value, considering how often you've said the press misrepresents you." Harry smirked. "Yes, well, the difference is, Dermot, I can usually choose who I speak to. Today, apparently, I didn't have that luxury." The tension in the studio sharpened, though Alison jumped in quickly to smooth things over. "Oh, come now, Harry. We're delighted you're here. Everyone watching at home wants to hear about your projects, your life, and of course, your family. How are Archie and Libbet doing?" Harry sighed dramatically, shifting in his chair. "They're fine, Alison. Perfect, in fact. But every time someone asks me about my children on live television, I wonder, are you genuinely interested or are you just fishing for a soundbite? Because if it's the latter, I'll save us all the trouble and say they're wonderful. Full stop." The audience stirred, the tension palpable. Alison gave a nervous laugh. "Well, we are genuinely interested, Harry. You're a father, after all, and many of our viewers are parents, too. It's a connection point." But Harry cut her off. "A connection point? Alison, you don't know me. You don't know my children. And you don't know what it's like to live under the constant shadow of a monarchy that dictates everything about your existence. So, forgive me if I don't see this as a cozy little chat." Dermot shifted in his chair, his calm demeanor starting to fray at the edges. He leaned forward, his voice firmer now. "Harry, with all due respect, you did agree to be here. And when public figures come on this morning, the idea is to have an open conversation. That's not about intrusion. It's about honesty with the public who followed your journey." Harry's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. "Honesty? Don't lecture me about honesty, Dermot. I've been forced to live honestly every single day while the press twists everything I say and do. If anything, this is just another circus performance. I'm in the show pony and you're the handlers making sure I trot out the right lines." Gasps rippled through the audience. Alison's eyes darted to Dermot, silently pleading with him to keep things under control. Dermot inhaled slowly, visibly restraining himself. "Harry," Alison said gently, "we just want to understand your perspective." People admire you for speaking out, for carving your own path. Surely talking about that is a good thing. Harry crossed his arms, his tone dripping with disdain. Or maybe it's just good for your ratings. Let's not pretend this is about understanding me. This is about you, your program, and the spectacle of having a prince who turned his back on the institution. The air in the studio felt heavier now, as if the lights themselves had dimmed with the growing hostility. Dermot's smile had vanished entirely, his patience tested, but not yet broken. Alison, still trying to hold the fragile balance, cleared her throat. Well, let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll continue our conversation with Prince Harry. The camera cut to commercial, but the tension lingered like static in the air. What had begun as a simple morning show chat was already veering off course, and the worst was still to come. When the cameras returned from the break, Alison Hammond's smile was brighter than ever, though it seemed stretched thin with effort. Dermot Liage adjusted his posture, leaning slightly forward at the desk, his expression calm but clipped. Between them, Prince Harry sat with one leg crossed over the other, arms folded tightly across his chest, radiating an air of defiance. Alison jumped in quickly, trying to reset the tone. Welcome back to This Morning. We're joined today by Prince Harry talking about life, family, and his new projects. Her laugh was cheerful, but carried a nervous undertone. Harry, let's dive into your latest charity work. You've been involved with some incredible organizations in California, right? Harry gave a slow, dismissive nod. Yes, though I imagine the specifics aren't of much interest to your viewers. People here prefer the gossip, don't they? Alison blinked, thrown off balance. Well, I think our viewers are genuinely curious about the positive work you're doing. Harry smirked, leaning back in his chair. Curious, perhaps, but not committed. Let's face it, charity work doesn't make headlines. My private life does. That's why I'm sitting here, isn't it? The audience murmured, some nervously laughing. Dermot's face tightened, but he kept his voice steady. Harry, to be fair, many people are interested in the work you do. We just try to give a balance, talk about your projects, but also about the things the public wants to know. That's the nature of live television. Harry scoffed. Balance? No, Dermot. Balance would mean focusing on substance, not trying to trip me up with questions about my wife and children. Dermot inhaled slowly, his patience clearly wearing thinner. I don't think asking about your family is tripping you up, Harry. It's something viewers relate to. You've often spoken about wanting to be a good father. That's something people admire. Harry's laugh was sharp and humorless. Admire or scrutinize? Every word I say about my children is dissected, analyzed, twisted into something else. And now, here you are playing the same game. Alison interjected, her voice softer. Harry? I think Dermot means it in a positive light. People love hearing about Archie and Leet. How are they doing? Harry's lips pressed into a thin smile, but the sarcasm in his tone was unmistakable. They're thriving, Alison. Thriving despite the constant noise, despite the endless speculation, despite the fact that their father can't so much as sneeze without someone writing an article about it. But thank you for asking. Again? The tension was growing unbearable. The audience shifted in their seats, the awkward energy radiating through the studio. Dermot straightened his notes, his jaw tightening before he spoke again. Let's pivot a little, Derpam, Mock Dermot said, his tone professional but firm. Harry, there's been a lot of talk about your Netflix projects, documentaries, specials. Some reports even suggest there were disputes over financial demands for the new season. Can you tell us more about that? Harry's eyes narrowed, his expression icy. Ah, there it is. The money question. Predictable Dermot raised his brows. It's not meant to provoke Harry. These are public reports. People are curious if there's truth to them. Harry leaned forward now, his voice sharp, dripping with disdain. People are curious because the press feeds them lies, and programs like this keep serving it up on a silver platter. You call it journalism. I call it voyeurism. Gasps fluttered through the audience. Alison visibly tensed, her hands gripping the table as she tried to smooth over the friction. Harry, I don't think Dermot meant it like that. He's just asking the questions on people's minds. But Harry wasn't done, and maybe people's minds are too small if they're obsessed with whether or not I negotiated for a fair paycheck. Last time I checked, I wasn't the only person in the world trying to provide for his family. The audience's unease turned into scattered applause, but the atmosphere remained heavy. Dermot's patience was wearing thinner by the second. He forced a polite smile. Fair enough, Harry, but you've spoken often about moving away from the trappings of the monarchy. Doesn't taking multi-million-dollar deals while criticizing the institution look contradictory to some people? That was the spark. Harry's eyes flashed. Contradictory? You mean surviving? You mean making a life outside of a gilded cage that crushed my mother and nearly destroyed me? Forgive me if I don't cry into my crown and jewels. Alison quickly leaned in. Harry, no one's denying your experiences. Dermot is just saying. Harry cut her off, his voice rising. No, Alison. Dermot is insinuating that I'm a hypocrite, that I wanted out, but I also wanted the resources to build a life. Newsflash, that's called adapting. It's called refusing to be defined by a broken system. Dermot's jaw clenched. His calm facade was beginning to crack. He exhaled sharply before speaking. Harry, I'm not insinuating anything. But people are watching you criticize the monarchy while enjoying privileges that came from it. That's where the questions come from. Harry leaned in closer, his face set in stone. Privileges? Do you think privilege is watching your mother die in a car crash because of the institution's obsession with control? Do you think privilege is being hunted by cameras every single day of your life? Keep your lecture about privilege, Dermot. You haven't lived mine. The studio fell silent. The audience held its breath. Alison, eyes wide, reached out as though to place a calming hand between them. All right, let's all take a moment. This is getting a bit heated. Let's not forget we're live. But Dermot's composure was cracking, his voice low but tight. I respect your pain, Harry. I really do. But there's a difference between sharing your story and sneering at anyone who dares to ask a question. This isn't therapy, it's television. Harry's lips curved into a smirk, his voice cold. And maybe that's the problem, Dermot. Too much television. Too many people like you pretending to care while digging for drama. Congratulations, you've got it. The tension was now suffocating, the air so thick it felt like it could shatter. Alison forced a strange smile at the cameras. We'll be right back after the break. But as the screen faded to commercial, the studio buzzed with the realization that this was no longer a friendly chat. It was a collision course, and they had only just hit the halfway point. When the cameras came back from commercial, Alison Hammond's laugh rang out a little too loudly, the kind of laugh that television veterans knew was meant to mask tension. She turned toward the camera, her smile wide but brittle. Welcome back to This Morning. We're still here with Prince Harry talking about his life, his family, and his upcoming projects. Beside her, Dermot Larry sat motionless, his notes stacked neatly in front of him. His expression was professional, but the tight line of his jaw betrayed the storm brewing beneath. Harry, on the other hand, looked utterly unbothered. He leaned back on the indigo sofa, arms spread casually along the backrest, exuding an arrogance that filled the room. Alison tried again to lighten the mood. Harry, let's pivot a little bit. You've spoken so often about mental health, about resilience. Do you feel your platform has helped bring awareness to those issues? Harry didn't even look at her at first. He stared straight ahead, then finally turned his head with a faint smirk. Awareness? Sure, though I doubt your viewers need me to remind them that mental health matters. It's common sense, Alison. Maybe you should ask me something less obvious. The audience gasped softly. Alison's smile froze, but she pushed on, her voice a shade tighter. I think what people want to know is how you personally have used your voice to change the conversation. That's important? Harry shrugged. I've said what I needed to say. If people haven't heard it by now, they're not listening. Maybe it's not my job to spoon-feed truths that the world should already understand. Dermot shifted in his chair, finally speaking. With respect, Harry, Raising awareness is a continuous job. It doesn't end after one interview or one speech. That's why people are curious about your ongoing role. Harry tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. Curious or just nosy? Let's be honest, most of the time these questions aren't about solutions. They're about keeping me on the defensive, and frankly, I'm tired of it. The atmosphere thickened again. Alison nervously reached for her water glass, buying time. Dermot, however, was growing less patient. He leaned slightly forward, voice measured, but pointed. "All right, let's address something more specific then," Dermot said, his gaze steady. "There's been a lot of public speculation about your relationship with your brother, Prince William. Many people wonder if reconciliation is possible. Do you see that happening in the future?" Harry's smirk vanished, replaced by a glare. Speculation, speculation, speculation. That's all people ever want. William lives his life. I live mine. And frankly, I don't owe anyone an update on our family chats or lack thereof. Dermot nodded calmly. But you've chosen to speak publicly about those family tensions before, so it's natural that people ask where things stand now. Harry's voice sharpened. Natural. No, Dermot. Voyeuristic. People want the drama, not the truth. The truth is my brother and I are different men with different paths. End of story. The audience stirred again. Alison interjected quickly. But Harry, don't you think people root for you too? Harry cut her off, his tone icy. People root for what makes them feel better, not what's real. If they want fairy tales, they can turn on Disney+. This is my life, not their bedtime story. The air crackled with tension. Dermot's patience was slipping further. He glanced briefly at Alison, then leaned forward again. Fair enough. But when you release books, documentaries, and interviews that bring those private tensions into the public domain, surely you understand why people follow up? Harry gave a short, bitter laugh. Of course you'd spin it that way. Always the same logic. I tell my story and suddenly I'm accused of oversharing. Yet the palace feeds the press daily, and nobody calls them out. Hypocrisy at its finest. Alison's smile was slipping now, her voice quieter. Harry, I think Dermot just means Harry. Cut her off again. I know exactly what Dermot means, and maybe he should admit what he's really saying, that it's fine for the palace to control the narrative, but not fine for me to speak my truth. The audience buzzed with unease. Dermot's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm, though there was steel beneath it now. Harry, what I'm saying is simple. When you ask the world to listen, the world is also going to ask questions. That's not persecution, that's accountability. Harry leaned forward suddenly, his voice sharp as a blade. Accountability for whom? For me? What about accountability for the family that silenced me, for the institution that chewed up my mother and tried to do the same to my wife? Where's their accountability? The words hung heavy in the studio, the silence deafening. Alison placed a gentle hand on Dermot's arm, trying to calm the tension. All right, let's move on. But Dermot's calm mask was cracking. He exhaled slowly, his voice lower. Now we can move on, Alison, but let's not ignore what's happening here. Every time I ask a question, Harry, you deflect, insult, or belittle. This isn't a witch hunt, it's an interview. You came here by choice. Harry's smirk returned cold and cutting. Choice? Choice? Hardly. These interviews are just part of the circus, and you, Dermot, are one of the ringmasters. That was it. The spark lit the fuse. Dermot leaned forward, his tone still even, but no longer patient. I've interviewed politicians, celebrities, grieving parents, people under immense pressure, and never once have I been treated with the level of disdain you've shown today. It's not strength, Harry. It's arrogance. The audience gasped. Alison jumped in quickly, her voice higher, more frantic. Okay, let's just take a breath. We don't want this to get out of hand. But Harry only smirked wider as though enjoying the chaos. Arrogance, Dermot, or perhaps just honesty? I don't sugarcoat for people who don't deserve it. Dermot's eyes locked on Harry's, the tension now palpable. And there it is again, the contempt. Maybe the problem isn't the monarchy or the media or your family. Maybe the problem, Harry, is you. The words hit the studio like a thunderclap. Alison's face went pale. The audience audibly gasped, and Harry froze for a fraction of a second before his jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing into fury. For a moment, the three sat in utter silence. The storm had arrived, and everyone knew there was no turning back. The cameras kept rolling. The producers didn't dare cut to commercial. What was unfolding was bigger than morning chatter. It was history in the making. The studio air was thick, suffocating, as if the very oxygen had been drained away. Dermot Larry sat rigid in his chair, his knuckles white where they gripped the cords. Harry lounged opposite him, a smirk plastered across his face, enjoying the discomfort his words created. Alison Hammond tried desperately to cut the tension, her voice pitched higher than usual. "All right, gentlemen," she said with forced cheer. "Let's not—" But Harry raised a hand dismissively. "Don't worry, Alison. Dermot clearly needs to get something off his chest. Let him." Dermot leaned forward, no longer the measured diplomatic host. His voice was low but carried across the studio like a warning shot. "You want honesty, Harry? Fine, let's have it." The audience went pin-drop silent. Alison's wide eyes darted between the two men, her hand hovering over Dermot's arm as though touch alone might cool the fire. "You've spent the last hour," Dermot continued, "telling the world how unfairly you've been treated, how silenced you've been, how misunderstood you are. But let's look at reality, shall we? You claim to hate the monarchy, but it's the monarchy that gave you the platform you stand on. Without the royal name, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have Netflix deals, book contracts, or this interview. You've cashed every check stamped with the crown while telling us all how oppressive it is. Do you not see the hypocrisy?" The audience gasped audibly, phones whipped out to record. Harry's smirk faltered, his jaw clenching, but he forced out a scoff. "Hypocrisy number. It's called survival. I'm not going to apologize for using what was forced on me." Dermot's voice grew sharper. "Survival. Harry, you're one of the most privileged men on the planet. You've traded castles for California mansions, tabloids for Netflix specials. That's not survival. That's self-indulgence." Alison tried again, her voice shaking. "Dermot, please." But he was past the point of return. Years of broadcasting experience had taught him composure, but Harry's sneering condescension had eroded every ounce of it. "And another thing," Dermot said, leaning so far forward, the space between them felt dangerous. "You constantly attacked the very family that gave you everything, all while hiding behind words like truth and authenticity. But isn't it true, Harry, that without Meghan's push, without the spotlight you claim to hate, you'd still be the forgotten spare? Isn't all of this, every interview, every book, just another way to cling to relevance?" Harry's face flushed red, his voice rising. "How dare you?" "But no, how dare you, T?" Dermot snapped, his voice booming across the set. "How dare you sit here and sneer at us, sneer at the public, sneer at your family, while taking full advantage of every privilege that comes with your name. You've turned grievance into a brand, pain into a paycheck. And this," he gestured around the studio into yet another stage for your arrogance. The audience erupted, some gasping, some clapping nervously, others whispering furiously. Alison stood halfway out of her chair, her arms outstretched as if trying to hold back two fighters. "Please, let's not." But Harry shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the studio floor, his voice cracked with fury. "I don't have to take this. Not from you, not from anyone. You think you know my life. You know nothing. You sit here with your smug questions pretending to be fair, when really you're just another cog in the media machine that's tried to destroy me and my wife." Dermot stood too, his chest heaving, his voice ice-cold. "If you can't answer fair questions without resorting to insults and tantrums, then maybe you shouldn't come on the show at all." Harry's fists tightened at his sides. For a terrifying moment, the audience thought he might actually lash out. Instead, he pointed a shaking finger at Dermot. "You'll regret this, both of you. Everyone will see how you've treated me. This is an ambush, pure and simple." Dermot, unflinching, turned to the cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to apologize. This is not the conversation we intended to have this morning. We respect our guests, but respect is a two-way street, and I cannot in good conscience continue this interview. Harry froze, the words sinking in. Dermot had said it. The interview was over. He had been cut off, dismissed. "You're throwing me out?" Harry demanded, his voice incredulous. Dermot met his eyes steady and unyielding. "Yes, this morning, not your soapbox. It's time you left." The audience gasped again. Alison covered her mouth in shock, shaking her head. Harry's face twisted with rage. Humiliation painted across every line. He grabbed his jacket from the sofa, muttering under his breath, "Unbelievable. You'll all see. You'll regret this." With that, he stormed off the set, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. Alison, still wide-eyed, turned back to the camera. I'm so sorry you had to witness that. That's not what this show is about. We try to bring light and joy into people's mornings, and I think we can all agree that wasn't it." Dermot exhaled deeply, his face pale but resolute. "We'll be right back after the break." The screen faded to the This Morning logo as the audience erupted into shocked chatter, the footage destined to become one of the most replayed, dissected, and explosive moments in British daytime television history. Harry had come to control the narrative. Instead, he had been ejected from it live on air. What did you think of this confrontation? Was Dermot right to call him out, or did Harry go too far? Let us know in the comments below. We want to hear your thoughts.